Yes, everyone, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack here, and we are going to be giving you a big detailed review on the likes of Arne Slot because it does look like he is the lead contender to be taking the Spurs managerial position here, everybody. According to Matt Law of the Daily Telegraph, Tottenham Hotspur are stepping up their interest in Arne Slot as Feyenoord brace themselves for a battle to keep their highly rated head coach. Telegraph Sport reported that Feyenoord wants Slot to sign a new contract, but Spurs are understood to be keen to speak to the Dutchman about their vacancy. And Xabi Alonso, who has been linked with Tottenham in the past, on Wednesday did confirm that he will be staying at Bayer Leverkusen next season after it emerged that last week we do not expect to appoint the German, the skinny jean wearing skateboarder, Julian Nagelsmann.
Tottenham have insisted that there has not yet been a top target, but it is becoming increasingly clear that serious consideration is being given to Arne Slot, who guided Feyenoord to only their second Eredivisie title success this century. Spurs also made contact with former Barcelona manager Luis Enrique, but there has been no word of significant progress with the Spaniard, while interest remains in Celtic's Ange Postecoglou and Brighton's Roberto De Zerbi, who continues to impress, although there are doubts over his fiery character. Feyenoord are prepared to reward Slot for the club's incredible season by offering a new contract worth almost $3 million a year, but that may not be enough to keep him. Slot could earn at least double that at Spurs, although sources are adamant that Tottenham will not have it completely their own way if chairman Daniel Levy makes a firm move for the 44-year-old. Not only would Tottenham need to pay Feyenoord around $6 million in compensation to hire Slot, Levy would also have to guarantee him ultimate control over the first team squad. First question is, will Daniel Levy give Arne Slot full control? Now, my opinion on it is I don't think Daniel Levy will. That's exactly why Nagelsmann, in my opinion, walked away from the job. It's why Antonio Conte failed at Tottenham, and it's also why Jose Mourinho failed at Tottenham. Because for me, I don't think they were given full control over exactly who they wanted out and who they wanted brought in here. At Tottenham, I think we've sort of developed a culture where we expect a manager to come in here and get these players to fit his system, rather than us actually provide players to fit the manager's system, which is what Pep Guardiola done at Man City to implement his style fully, is exactly what Jurgen Klopp done at Liverpool to sort of implement his style fully, and it's exactly what we need to give Arne Slot. It'd be very interesting whether to see Daniel Levy will actually give that up or not, because this is the second manager after Nagelsmann that has asked for that. It is also worth mentioning that we know Arne Slot's contract is up in 2025, so there will be the compensation fee, like we spoke about a bit earlier on in the report. It's believed to be in and around €6 million, but I don't think that will deter Tottenham because, like I said, we have probably been able to offer him double the wages, with Feyenoord sort of offering him only $3 million. Tottenham were able to offer Conte $14 million, so you'd like to think we'd almost be able to double his wages to tempt him out of Feyenoord. But it is also worth noting he rejected the Leeds job back in January, and many people really sort of put that down to him being in a title challenge, being in another European campaign, and wanted to see that out. So we're sort of at a time where if Tottenham really do go in for him and put an offer on the table, will he accept? Will it be different to, when he turned down Leeds in February? My opinion is, I think if Tottenham go for their man, I think they'll get him.
Now we got to do a bit of background on who actually is Arne Slot. Of course, he is Dutch and he is the current Feyenoord manager, but he did spend in the entirety of his career actually playing over in Holland, and actually maybe wasn't really known very much for his sort of playing days. And he's actually also spent the entirety of his managerial career over in Holland as well. He's known as a head coach who also wants to entertain as well as play a bit of attractive football. And Slot is building definitely a reputation as sort of one of Europe's brightest and definitely up and coming sort of managers due to his impressive work with AZ Alkmaar as well as Feyenoord. And former Tottenham goalkeeper Michel Vorm actually said of Slot, I think he's ready. He showed that because I know the Dutch league well and what he's done before. I speak with a lot of players in Holland and over the years at AZ and now at Feyenoord, how positive they are about him over there and the style of play, how he communicates and treats all the players, and they have done so very well. Now, Arne Slot became manager over at AZ Alkmaar in 2019 in his first season in charge. He was actually competing for a league title with at the likes of Ajax, but the season was cut short due to the likes of COVID-19 pandemic, and they ultimately had to cancel the season halfway through, which actually denied Slot the opportunity and the chance to see if he could even challenge the likes of an Erik ten Hag, the current Manchester United manager, for an Eredivisie title. Despite competing for a league title the previous season with Ajax, he was actually sacked the following season in December at AZ Alkmaar because he was accused of actually being too interested or maybe being too focused on his future job with the likes of Feyenoord. And also, though, despite actually getting the sack, he did finish with the highest points per game ratio of any AZ Alkmaar manager ever. Over at Feyenoord, though, Arne Slot has quickly made a name for himself there too. He's already won the Eredivisie title with games to spare and has only suffered one loss in the entirety of this domestic season. It's also important to remember that Feyenoord are not exactly Ajax or PSV Eindhoven, who both share 18 titles since the year 2000, whereas Feyenoord have only won the league twice in the 21st century alone, with Arne Slot's actually being the second title in that 21st century. When it comes to last season, Feyenoord finished third in the league, well behind Ajax and PSV, but Arne Slot pushed his side as far as the final in the Conference League, losing 1-0 to Jose Mourinho's Roma. Despite missing that chance for an earlier trophy in his career, his Feyenoord side actually went undefeated on that road to the final, whereas Jose's side actually did not. They did lose a few games to the likes of Bodo Glimt and found it a bit trickier than that Feyenoord side. When it comes to the Europa Conference League, plenty of players did flourish in that Feyenoord side, with one of his forwards, Cyriel Dessers, finishing top scorer and Luis Sinisterra finishing with the second most goal contributions in that competition. Slot's Feyenoord finished last season in third with 76 goals scored and 34 conceded, whereas this season he's on 78 goals scored and 28 conceded, with still 2 matches left to play. Definitely showing some improvement in that regard.
So, as Jack alluded to, Arne Slot knows how to improve a backline. Definitely exactly what we need at Tottenham. Now, let's maybe take a look into his tactics at Feyenoord. When he arrived at Feyenoord, he said it would take him time to instill his philosophy on the players, and it might be the case at Tottenham if he gets the job. But the players at Feyenoord have clearly been able to receive Slot's instructions and philosophy quickly and effectively. On paper, Slot's Feyenoord play with a 4-2-3-1 in possession. The fullbacks, they push high. Centre-backs like to split with the goalkeeper sort of acting as a third ball player between them two centre-backs, if you like, with the two holding midfielders tasked with moving into positions to be able to receive the ball and to progress it. Slot likes the ball to be moved fast and break the lines and get the ball higher up the pitch as quick as possible, which, look, let's be honest, it's what many Spurs fans want to see. If they are pressed across the back line and unable to press out the back, his goalkeeper at Feyenoord, I believe his name is Bijlou, looks to beat the press and he goes a bit longer into one of the attacking players, more into their chest or their feet, with players then pushing up to support that player or compete for the second ball. And look, that's exactly what Arne Slot is going to need in his new number one at Tottenham.
There are plenty of players actually that Slot counts on in order for his system to work. Lautaro Getroida is a skilled right-sided fullback who's often asked to come infield with the ball, while the right winger actually keeps the width for the team. Orkun Kokcu is an important midfielder in Slot's system as well. He's one of their creative midfielders as well as their sort of tempo setter who can often drop deep to help link up play and break the lines of the opposition. Last season under Slot, Kokcu had his breakout season with 7 goals and 9 assists in the Eredivisie and followed that up with a decent 8 goals and 2 assists this season in the league thus far, followed by 3 goals and 2 assists in the Europa League over 10 matches played. Last season, Slot was also able to get a lot out of the current PSV Eindhoven and Dutch national team midfielder Gus Thiel, who recorded 15 goals and 3 assists in the league, playing as a conventional cam position behind the striker. Last season, Cyriel Dessers finished top scorer in the Conference League and earned himself a move away to the Serie A. Slot was also able to get similar end product the following season with his big number 9 in the case of Santiago Jimenez, who currently sits 4th in the Eredivisie in terms of the top scorers list and has been linked to moves away as well after a terrific breakout season. Lots of players have definitely thrived under Slot, but have definitely quickly left on to bigger moves to the likes of other clubs, yet he has still been able to get similar end product and give breakout seasons to new stars the following season without compromising or really changing his shape or his tactics or his system too much.
So let's look at maybe what Arne Slot can bring to Tottenham, or what maybe he can already work with at Tottenham and what he will need. Let's decipher through that now. So players who could thrive under Arne Slot. Let's start with the wingers. Slot, he does like his wingers who, cut inside. He looks for them to sort of create a lot of chances, maybe score some goals as well. But he also does like some of his wingers to keep the width, and majority of the time keep the width with a view of maybe cutting inside, a bit like what Pochettino asked of his wingers at the time when he was here. Now, for me, I think it'll definitely suit someone like Kulusevski playing on the right-hand side, who we know, already playing out there. He likes to cut in, cross the ball at different angles, also get a few shots off. So with him cutting in and the fullback bombing, overlapping on the outside of him, taking maybe a player or two with him, I definitely think it would definitely suit someone like Dejan Kulusevski, or even like someone like Brian Hill under Conte. He came on the right-hand side. He liked to cut in on his left as well. So it definitely suit players like that. I think you could also get a lot of Pedro Porro, who is dangerous in those wide areas when providing crosses. But where I'm a bit torn on Pedro Porro is he is weak defensively. And it's not really why we brought him in here. We brought him in here for his attack and play. So will Arne Slot look at him more as a right back, or would he look at him as more as a right winger, or someone that can maybe give Kulusevski a bit of a run for his money at right wing? It'd be very interesting to see. Now, moving over to the left-hand side, Luis Sinisterra thrived under Arne Slot, and despite Sonny and Sinisterra's different sort of physiques, they actually have a lot in common in terms of how they like to play. So I could see Arne Slot sort of finding a unique but effective role for Sonny, a bit like what he did with Sinisterra. And I definitely believe he can get Sonny back to his best in terms of output, in terms of goals and assists.
Now, which sort of fullbacks can the likes of Arne Slot work with? Emerson has definitely shown that he is sort of capable of moving in field while allowing other players to keep the width under the likes of Antonio Conte. And we were just speaking about earlier how the likes of that guy Getroida over at Feyenoord has been asked to sort of move in field often, whereas sort of the wingers maybe can be asked to keep the width. While they also maybe cut inside, it seems like Getroida does like to sort of come inside to maybe add to the midfield and sort of come in field in that sort of regard. We've seen Emerson do that for the likes of Antonio Conte. Seems like a role that maybe he could be potentially comfortable with, but of course, as always, he will need to be getting a lot better on the ball over time. Also, maybe just a quick mention, Jed Spence, who we do know is an excellent ball carrier. You could see him actually potentially benefiting from this sort of role under Arne Slot, asking him to maybe do a lot coming into midfield, being sort of creative in that way. But as always, I think with Jed Spence, there are maybe some question marks with him defensively. Now, when it comes to the left-hand side, when in terms of fullbacks, we do have the likes of Destiny Udogie, of course, coming back from the likes of Loan and Udinese, but he was playing more as sort of a left wing back. And what I would say when watching Udogie, he definitely seems like more of a left wing back, at least at the moment, than he does seem maybe more as a fullback. He definitely can contribute going forward. He's a very creative sort of player. One of his best attributes, certainly, I would say, is definitely his ball carrying ability. And you could see him maybe even doing that sort of role, kind of being asked to come in field and maybe helping out in the likes of sort of the midfield and carrying the ball in there. And maybe on the left-hand side, allowing Sonny to more or less keep the width. But still, I think question marks will be there over sort of his defensive skills and whether he really can play sort of a conventional left back position in sort of the Premier League, where you are going to be asked a lot more defensively. And so will be interesting to see if the likes of a Sergio Reguilon, potentially maybe even a Ben Davies, are kept around just to have as sort of competition, but as well as also maybe a bit more defensive solidity than maybe the likes of a Destiny Udogie.
Now, let's move into the forward line and take a look at what we've got there. And this is actually an area where I don't believe we actually have to spend any money to help Arne Slot implement his style of play, because you've got two forwards up there who can hold up the ball. They're very, very good at that. The likes of Kane and Richarlison. Now, we know with Harry Kane, he'll adapt to any system, any style of play. He will not be a problem for Arne Slot. But with Richarlison, he's sort of been a very underwhelming this season. We haven't really got the best out of Richarlison, but I actually think someone like Arne Slot will get the best out of Richarlison. When he looks to beat the press with his style of play, it is getting the ball into the forward player and looking for him to hold up and get players off to support him. That's what Richarlison done at Everton so well. But also, Arne Slot likes his wingers to create, which means Richarlison doesn't have to really get involved too much in the intricate build-up play in the final third, which means we can get him back to what he was best at with Everton, which is getting in the box, hunting the ball, and hunting goals.
Spurs fans do want to go to a back four, and I do think Slot can actually provide that, but he is ultimately going to need center backs and center backs that are going to be able to deal with that sort of counterattack when we are very far forward, but also center backs that are going to need to be able to be comfortable enough on the ball when dealing with the likes of pressure from the opposition when they're sort of deep in our own half trying to win the ball high up the pitch. Spurs fans do want to watch attacking and entertaining football, and I do think Slot can provide that. His teams have always been able to score goals, but an important factor is that he's been able to get goals out of different areas, different parts of the pitch. He's been able to get goals out of midfielders like Kokju. He's been able to get goals out of cams like the likes of Gus Teal, Santiago Jimenez this season as a conventional number 9. It's been able to contribute. And then last season, he was able to get a lot out of wingers like Luis Sinisterra. So it does look like maybe at least Arne Slot's system isn't exactly dependent on one, maybe two players to be able to contribute the majority of the goals. It looks like you can get goals from different areas.
Now, let's look at positions that we definitely need to buy under Arne Slot to be able to help him implement his style of play at Tottenham Hotspur. And we will start with goalkeeper. It's an absolute must. We need a goalkeeper with good distribution and capable of going long when our defence is put under pressure. And I don't mean just hoofing it long, lumping it long. I mean actually like a long-range pass into one of the forwards players' chest, into their feet if you can. For too long, we've watched Hugo Lloris just absolutely balloon it with no direction whatsoever, 50 yards up in the air, not giving Kane any chance of winning it with two big 6-foot-plus centre-backs climbing all over him. So we do need a goalkeeper that is actually very, very good with his feet, but also very, very good with his arms that can distribute.
Now, of course, I feel like Arne Slot needs to look at right back as well because Emerson, while being very good defensively this season, is still going to need a lot of developing to do when it comes to his ability going forward. And we saw the likes of with Lautaro Gatroida, he was able to come infield, sort of help out the midfielders as well as give the wingers sort of that chance to work in those wide areas. And I think Emerson was able to successfully do that under Antonio Conte, but can he exactly replicate that with Arne Slot? I think it's left to be seen. But maybe then is there a chance for somebody like a Jed Spence to sort of come in and be able to play that role? That could be certainly interesting with how good he is with his ball carrying. But if he doesn't really like Jed Spence, and maybe if there's still a bit of work to be done with the likes of Emerson, he does maybe have to look at bringing in a right back because the likes of Pedro Porro, I think, is proving maybe to be too defensively kind of unreliable or still needing a lot of work to do defensively, whereas he's looking more like a right winger, especially maybe a right wing back, than he really is in any way a conventional right back.
I think Jack is absolutely spot on when it comes to right back. So let's take a look at left back. Look, for me, Edozie, he's a bit of an unknown quantity coming in here. Can he play left back? You know, there's not really a large bite-sized example that we can pick from because, like Jack explained, at Udinese, he has played more as a left wing back. So there are big question marks over whether he can actually play left back and how defensively solid is this guy. So that leaves you with three options. That leaves you with bringing in a new left back. That leaves you with putting Ben Davies back out there, which in my opinion, under Jose Mourinho, he really struggled out there. That's why he was moved inside as a left-sided centre-back, which actually happened under Jose Mourinho, but was continued on with Conte, who played him on the left side of a tree. So for me, putting him back out there with the pacey, skillful wingers in the game nowadays is going to be absolutely suicide. So that brings me on to the last option, Sergi Reguilon. And for me, you know, I think he was unfair to be loaned out, to be honest with you. I think he was loaned out more so because of the English quota, the homegrown quota, and that's why Session had to stay. But for me, we're at a time now where you got to look at other homegrown options, bring them through. But definitely, I think we can definitely recycle and reuse Sergi Reguilon in the Arne Slot system.
Now, this one is the most obvious of the ones. It's center back, and he's going to need plenty of them, Arne Slot. But what I would say, something to be quite specific about, is that he is going to need to sign a center back that Romero, right, can trust. Because Romero this season, of course, has maybe been caught out to make his own mistakes. But I think part of the reason has been is that maybe he doesn't exactly trust, sort of, in my opinion, the incompetent defenders around him. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of center backs we can find that maybe Romero can trust when he is sort of stepping out of that defense to be that aggressive defender he is so good at being. But also we're going to need to find a defender that's going to be very good on the ball, someone that can be able to handle, right, the high pressure, the high presses from the teams like Brighton, Arsenal, etc.
Now, I know there's an argument out there that, with Kane getting older, with them legs maybe no longer pumping as quick as they once were, that maybe Kane eventually later on in his career would drop back to that sort of calm position. As we know, he's a very good creator. He's got a very good passing range and he could definitely fill that role. But for me, he's most lethal inside that box. He's hungry for goals. He's an absolute born finisher. And for me, I actually believe you're sort of, solving one problem, but creating another. I'm not sure Richarlison will pick up that void and match Harry Kane in terms of output, in terms of goals. So for me, I'm not sure how much of an option Harry Kane is right now in that position. Maybe for a needs must or a game or two where Arne Slot wants to try something different, I can get behind it. But long term right now, I'm not convinced by it. So that leaves you on to Kulusevski, who has actually come out before and said that's where he sees himself playing long term. And I've no doubt Kulusevski can definitely play there. He's got a sweet left boot on him. However, he offers us way too much on the right-hand side for us to move him inside. So for me, again, I think it's sort of solving a problem, but then creating another. So that leads me down to the luscious flowing locks of the prophecy, Gil Messi. Now, for me, I think he's definitely a player where I see him playing in that position long term. When you play him out either side on the wing, it's very easy for a fullback to show him out on the byline and actually sort of bully him off the ball. Whereas for me, if you put him in the cam, this is a guy that's going to pick up a lot of free kicks. He can move left or right without really being restricted. And like I said, he'll create absolute havoc like he did off the bench at times this season. So it'll be very interesting to see whether Arne Slot does see a future for the prophecy of Gil Messi in there in the long term. But regardless, I think many Spurs fans will actually want Spurs to go out and buy a player, a specialist in that position, rather than taking a player out of one position and making it fit into another. So I would say that's definitely a position we will be buying in this summer if Arne Slot is named as Tottenham's new manager. Now, I know some other people might say, look, we might need more centre midfielders. We might need another player on either left or right wing. Regardless of all of that, we actually need major surgery across that back line for Slot to have any chance of succeeding. We've seen that it's cost previous managers here. And for me, it's where you build that solid foundation. That's where your success comes from. So it's got to be focused on goalkeepers, centre-backs, and if you want full-backs, you got to stretch and do that as well. And then all the other pieces can be done after that. But I would say to Spurs fans, let's not maybe get too excited yet, though, about this, because it is worth noting that we did fail to follow through on our interest of Erik ten Hag during our search for Jose Mourinho's successor when it did look like he was going to be the guy in the door. I also want to say, in football, there is a misconception that many believe a manager should come in and mold footballers already at Tottenham Hotspur into their style of play. And that's just not simply the case, and it's just not simply a sustainable way of doing it. You look at Pochettino in the past, he got rid of a lot of players from his Tottenham squad in order to form what he ultimately ended up going to build upon. Now, granted, he did use some of what was already here. We also signed players to help him fully implement that. He was allowed to get rid of the likes of Adebayor, Holtby, players like that in order to build what he did at Tottenham. He didn't mold every single player in that squad to what he needed it to be. He actually had sort of full say, and we know that because it was your man Webb on TalkSport that said that. At that time, he had full say of exactly what he could work with and what he couldn't, and what Tottenham would go out and buy from. Also, to back me up even further, you look at Guardiola, he sort of overhauled his City squad before he could implement his style of play. Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, he also done the same. And it's important that we give Arne Slot this chance as well, because if not, it'll only end in failure like it did under Jose Mourinho, like it did under Antonio Conte. And I would also urge that it's not going to be rosy if this guy comes in. There will be periods, a few rocky periods. But instead of firing him at the first sign of trouble, you double down and you back him even further. You address them problem areas in the squad. If Arne Slot were to be hired as Spurs manager, could he be the second coming of Martin Jol? The reason why I say that is Arne Slot's middle name is Martin. So, Could it be Martin Slot, aka the second coming of Martin Yole? Let me know in the comments what you think. He's also got a bald head like Martin Yole. So it could be Martin Yole in disguise. Who knows?
Please like and subscribe, everybody. Feel free to leave a comment down below on anything we might have missed, something that we probably could have put a bit more detail on in the likes of Arne Slot, and as well give us your thoughts on the likes of, the manager, maybe something that you may know that you probably feel like is worth noting on the likes of the manager. But also as well, feel free to give us any managers that maybe you feel like Spurs should be taking a look at. Feel free as well, everybody, to support the channel further with the likes of grabbing a membership. You can also drop a super thanks as well in the comments down below. And as always, though, everybody, come on, you Spurs.
And in the Harris Army, we trust.
Everywhere we go.